at East Soldiers. Nothing like a little 9 p.m. coffee to get the party started. Oh my god, hold on. I want you to be blinded by my sparkling personality and not my face grease. And just a little lip gloss. And voila, you can't even tell that it's 9 p.m. and I've had a headache for 4 straight days. Not to brag or anything, but I went in for a massage yesterday and my RMT said that the tendons in my neck were so tense that it reminded her of cables on suspension bridges. Problematic neck muscles aside, that is actually not indicative of all of my reading for January 2024 because I started this year off with a bang. Actually, looking at this stack a little literally. Because your girl over here read 12 books this January. Not 8, not 10, like she promised in last week's video, but a whole 12, a whole even dozen. You could fill an egg carton with all the books that I read this month. We got smutty fairies, we got gang wars over fantasy minerals, interspersed amongst other fantastical things like ghost ships in other realms, fucked up deer in weird forests, and maybe the worst of all, teenage delinquents. I need to stop doing improv because I have a feeling this video is going to be long. So without further ado, grab a drink, grab a snack, and join me as we go over the 12 books that I managed to read in January 2024. You like my mug? I needed a little extra comfort today, and this mug has been in my family for at least as long as I've been alive. Oh my god, this mug is almost 30 years old. Who made this? Excellent craftsmanship. Even I'm not staying together this well, hence massage appointment. The first 2 that I started the year off with were I'm going to call 2 of a pair because I read 2 Katie Robert books back to back. One I absolutely adored and one I absolutely did not. And you know, let's start off the new year on a good note. We are going to pay homage to the shirt that I'm currently wearing and we're going to talk about Midnight Ruin, the 5th of the Neon Gods Dark Olympus series. What started off as an unassuming contemporary smutty Greek retelling series has slowly blossomed into a crime syndicate fantasy thriller. We've gotten to a point where I care so much about this group of random weird people who are all working through their own relationship shit and who all somehow own a sex club. If I had a nickel for every time I read a book about people who owned a sex club this month, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it is weird it happened twice. Katie Robert was bringing her A game for Midnight Ruin, which is the story of Charon, Eurydice, and Orpheus. We follow Orpheus, the fallen, once golden boy, as he is trying to win back his relationship with Eurydice, who is just ready to move on. Eurydice and Charon entering into a forbidden romance, while the drama with Hades is ramping up and the barriers around Olympus are slowly falling. But this whole story really centers not holding people back, even if you want to protect them, and instead communicating healthy boundaries. And wow, we love to see it. And be warned, this book has some incredibly sexy times. Oh my god. And the most random, unexpected pop culture reference, which was Rime of the Ancient Mariner. If you're an old literature student, you get it. My one complaint of this book is truly very selfish, and I know that I shouldn't be looking too much into it, but I can't help my brain. Okay, so in this city, we are protected by magic. We don't know where this city is, but she references both Korea and Sweden, but then also Carver City, which is the city that's in her Wicked Villain series. And apparently Carver City is driving distance of Olympus. So where the hell are we? This one is in my top 3 of the entire series. I think the character development is so good. I love the sexy times and the communication. I love where this series is going. And I would agree that I think everyone feels more centered when they have pants on. Check. That all being said, this is my problem with Katie Robert, because I've read a lot of her stuff from a bunch of different series, and it seems that there are some high highs and some low lows, because unfortunately, a book that I DNF'd this month was Hunt on Dark Waters. This was supposed to be the fantasy wild hunt fairy novel of my freaking dreams, because the main character falls through a portal and then has to survive on this ship that is actually the Wild Hunt, and they hunt monsters in between dimensions, and I was like, that sounds so freaking cool. I love fairy lore and pirates. Our main love interest, Bowen, is dummy thick and has some problems with communication, but he has enough of a tragic backstory that I'm gonna let it slide. Sailing on the seas in the threshold between worlds, and they have migrating islands and fantasy beasts and characters with neo-pronouns. I should have loved this. But I absolutely despise our main character because she's so annoying. This is a thing that some romance novels do where we have 2 points of view, but the way that characters act in the other person's point of view makes no sense with the character that we just established in the previous chapter. Like, why even bother setting up this character when you're just then going to make her do something that you need to make her do because plot? Like, why don't you just make her like that in the first place? And it was very heavy-handed on the like, oh no, are we the bad guys? Wait, let me tell you my exact feelings like no human ever would. I DNF this at 60% because it's just so uninteresting. Like, we had so much potential. All the characters have one personality trait and the sex wasn't good enough to keep me distracted. W for Midnight Ruin. L for Hunt on Dark Waters. Now, those two books did set me on a bit of a romance kick this month, so the next book that I picked up and read and absolutely adored was Tastes Like Shakar by Nisha Sharma. When I heard that Nisha Sharma, the author of Dating Dr. Dill, which is the book I absolutely loved, which is also a Shakespearean retelling of Taming of the Shrew, was putting out another one of the If Shakespeare Was an Auntie series with Tastes Like Shakar being a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, aka my favorite Shakespeare play of all time ever, I knew I had to grab one. And I have to say, the bare minimum, the bare mini of Shakespeare was in this book. I really did not see a whole lot of parallels. However, this was so good that I'm willing to overlook it. It has that classic Nisha Sharma wit, along with really good depictions of male friendships, and of course, multiple Taylor Swift references. In this, we follow the best friends of Prem and Karina from Dating Dr. Dill, Bobby and Bunty, as the two of them butt heads over a shared past, but also have to work together to help plan their wedding. However, there's somebody trying to sabotage the wedding, and the two of them are trying to keep this hidden from the bride and groom, while also their growing chemistry gets a little distracting. There's a big undercurrent theme of the struggle of doing what's right for your family or for your community, and then doing what's right for yourself and your own boundaries, while also diving into the diaspora of children of immigrants and the expectations of South Asian families, and yet also talking about how to support your friends as they enter a new stage of life together. It was very sweet. And we love to see a man who fights against his culture's prejudices and makes good food and is considerate in his body care. We get some surprising rope kink, which is fun. Benjamin can keep my schedule tied up, if you know what I'm saying. Now, don't tell Shakar, but I do think I like Dating Dr. Jill just a little bit more. That being said, I absolutely am going to read the rest of whatever Nisha puts out in this series. My next romance novel is one that I showed off in, yet again, last week's video of my funky little book haul. And in that video, I mentioned that I recently got a new bookshelf and that I want to explore and expand my romantasy category. Romantasy is a genre that I really want to like. Unfortunately, I have not found a lot of romantasy books that really do it for me. And in this noble quest, I ended up buying a series from an author who I know I like, and I'm really hoping that I like her romance stuff, so I ended up reading The Deal with the Elf King, which is the first of Elise Kova's Married to Magic series. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling. Now, I have read this before, but it was a while ago, and I only remembered feeling mid about it, and that was not enough to stop me from buying the series to try again. And you know what? I'll admit it, I like this a lot more on the reread. Thousands of years ago, there was a battle waged between elves and humans, and to settle this in a truce, it is said that every 100 years, the elves will come to the human world and take with them a human queen, who is said to be the only human that has magic on Earth. Our main character, Lou, is a herbologist and healer of her town, and she thinks that she is too old to be taken as the human queen for this year's sacrifice, so she thinks she's in the clear. Surprise! She's not, and it is in fact her. But when she gets to the elven world, she learns that her magic is the only thing that is saving this dying world, and so that she and the elf king have to find a way to break this centuries-long curse. I love the contrast of the human queen carrying nature magic and the elf world being very like cold and made of stone and iron, because usually fae are associated with nature and warmth and growing things, so I thought that was kind of a neat twist. At first, I really did not like Aldous. I thought that he could not communicate properly and the two of them just yelled at each other. However, after learning a little bit more about like him being raised in isolation and like not having any friends growing up in the castle, I was like, all right, the emotional unawareness works fine in this scenario. I have lack of emotional awareness in my notes, but it's the time of night where I don't think the law applies to grammar. I also love Lou because she's like, okay, my top priority once getting here is to learn about my new magic and this deadly curse and figuring out how we're gonna break that. But also, we have to redecorate this place. It is positively derelict. Also, there is a very interesting subplot that I did not catch the first time I read this about, like, elves colonizing Fae territory, and the reason that they are at war with the Fae is because of this, and, like, because elves have lived on this territory for hundreds of years that now they don't know, like, how to give the land back. And that is a very intense theme that did not get resolved in this book. So I am hoping that that is a steady plot line throughout the rest of the series. But we've done it, folks. We found a new adult romantasy novel that I really, really liked. I mean, like, yes, sometimes Lou's snark is, like, a little much, but overall, I'm giving this more than a passing grade. Plus, it's so hard to resist a pretty boy. Speaking of pretty boys, who are also fae, I have such conflicted feelings about this book, but I got an advance copy and read my way through Lore of the Wilds by Annalise Brana, which is a fae-filled romantasy debut with a fully POC cast that follows Lore, whose small village is trapped within this enchanted forest that is surrounded by fae, and one day, fae warriors come to her village and they take her away to the palace of the elf king, fairy king. There's this magical library that the king needs her to get into and read some stuff, but they can't do it because it's cursed or whatever. And then she does, and then, oh my god, we're unearthing secrets, and then we have to run away because magical conspiracies, and then, like, sexy fae men, and one of them has antlers. Now, let's start with some things I liked about it. It's definitely a book for book lovers. The way that she talks about libraries and literature and maps is just, like, so beautiful. We have lunar magic grimoires, and magical cursed libraries, and corrupted nature magic, and people with antlers. Have I mentioned antlers yet? God, I am such a basic bitch bisexual. I will go absolutely feral for a moth and moon motif. But I don't want to say it. The writing wasn't good. First of all, I was promised magical library, and we only get, like, 20% magical library. They escape, like, so early on, and this is established as high fantasy, but every once in a while we get a modern slang word or a modern gesture that really took me out of it. Like, at one point, the main character refers to another character as a trash goblin, which I think is hilarious, but there are no goblins established in this world. The chapters would end in odd places, and, like, all these fairies just have names that sound like antidepressants. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, flip-flopping between personality traits doesn't make you mysterious, it makes me annoyed. And if I had a nickel for every time our main character was rescued by some very handsome black fae man with nice shoulders and a mysterious past, using some kind of dark, unexplained magic, while she is in a magical enchanted forest being hunted by soldiers, even though she went into the forest knowing that she was going to be hunted by soldiers, and then the soldiers came and tried to get her, and then the men had to kill said soldiers, I'd have 2 nickels. And despite this being labeled as new adult, the voice is very young, and that combined with the fact that there is a very detailed sex scene and the ending of the book gets very dark, it was so tonally inconsistent. I wanted this to be everything, and it just wasn't. I feel like it either needed another couple drafts or it needed to be marketed differently, because I was very let down by the lack of enchanted libraries in this book. Something else that I think needed another draft. Girl, you are killing it on the segues today. As part of their new imprint, Afterglow, Harlequin Books sent me a lovely care package that included a copy of The Fake Dating Game by Timothy Janofsky. Afterglow is their new imprint that focuses on spicy contemporary new adult books, and this is no exception. Spice levels? 5 peppers. Where our main character Holden is a guy in his late 20s who feels like his life is falling apart, he doesn't like his job, he just got dumped, and he's still dealing with the grief of losing his mother a few years ago. So in a last minute fuck it gesture, he spends all his money for a plane ticket to LA to compete for a game show that he and his family loved watching called Madcap Market, which is like a grocery store American Ninja Warrior. But one of his many problems is that now that his boyfriend broke up with him, he needs a partner, and he finds it in Leo, who is a concierge at the hotel that he's staying at, and the two of them strike up this fake friends to real friends to lovers game show contestant relationship as the two of them team up in an attempt to split the prize money, but end up falling in love along the way. Now, the good things about this book. Very fun, very sexy, very campy. Themes of when you're in your mid-20s and you're feeling disillusioned and unmoored, yet at the same time, some themes about like grief and dealing with the death of a parent. However, this does feel a little like the author wanted to write a smutty, gay, dom-sub relationship book, but also a whimsical whirlwind rom-com, and I don't know if those two things came together in the way that he imagined they would. Maybe pun intended, I don't know. Like, the fluffy parts were incredibly sweet, and it actually really went into what it means to start a relationship and actually get to know somebody. But then the sexy times went from 0 to 100 real fast, and it felt like fanfic wish fulfillment in a way, and like, Leo's a good dom, I'll give him that. But at the same time, it just felt it felt like a lot. Then again, I'm not a gay man, so maybe if I was a gay man, I would think about this differently. And the whole thing felt very fast, like it was like zoom plotline, zoom sexy time, zoom betrayal, zoom more plotline, and we're done, and we're moving on. And it was like, oh my god, like, I need a commercial break, relax. So overall, not my absolute favorite, but if you're looking for a fun, campy gay rom-com that has some just actually a lot of cooking antics, cooking-related antics, and a twink just getting absolutely destroyed, maybe you're gonna like this book. Okay, so the caffeine and the sleep deprivation is really kicking in right now, so I need to move on past that just to a fun little novella that I read this month that has to do with actually there are gays. Less gays pushing shopping carts down aisles to win money, and more gays entering cursed forests to bring fairy stolen children back. I read a very highly anticipated book of mine, which was The Butcher of the Forest by Premeh Mohammed, which yet again, unfortunately, was not all that I wanted it to be. Our main character, Varys, is an ace woman in her late 30s, and she is known for being the only woman to ever enter into the Enchanted Forest and bring someone back alive. And over the last few years, this new tyrant king has implemented himself and his army outside of this forest, and he threatens her family and her life if she cannot go into the forest and bring back 2 of his children who have mysteriously gone missing. Smart, wily characters in this cursed otherworld Hansel and Gretel type forest, corrupted nature and folk magic, and one of my favorites, things that are not things. Creatures that are not bears. A house that is only the imitation of a house. A forest inside a forest that is not so much a forest within something, but more a forest that is a step out of reality. Ooh, fuck me up with some of that shit. The world was cool and the atmosphere was wonderfully unsettling, but I felt like there was a lot of lost potential. Like, this is a lot smaller than I was expecting it to be. So I feel like if this is a full-length novel, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, because the main character felt kind of dull and underdeveloped. And then we just kind of get trauma dump backstory at the end. Also, like, the kids, because surprise, we do find them, they only get like, I don't know, 12 lines. And out of killer unicorns and deer gods that are taller than the trees, the most deadly thing in Elvamere is a scarf. I did like the consequences at the end, how like you are not always guaranteed to get what you were promised from the Fae. So I feel like this would be a good introduction to people that want to dip their toe into that uncanny valley fae territory. But as somebody who's kind of honed the idea of what they want in this type of novel, I just felt like it was lacking. Like, I really wanted this to fuck me up more. Oh my god, I have 2 other books that are not in this pile. Oh my god, I literally forgot. There's so many on this list. Okay, so I read 2 books that I do not have physical copies of. One was a Kindle book and one was an audiobook. And I want to talk about my fun, smutty read of January. Oh my god. I just felt the Dell startup sound happen. Alright, recalculating. Anyways, so I picked up an installment of a series I have read before, which is the Salacious Players Club by Sarah Kate. So this month I read Give Me More, which is the 3rd, 4th in this series. Couldn't tell you, but it has a poly-power throuple and friends to lovers, and I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I've read some of this series before, and this one by far is my favorite. I really loved deconstructing this power dynamic between Hunter, Isabel, and Drake. We have a guy battling his internalized homophobia as he's falling in love with his best friend, and then because of him pulling away due to that part of his sexuality, his best friend and his wife are starting to have this friends to lovers arc. We love to see a man coming to terms with his own bisexuality, and the three of them has this very fun best friend road trip dynamic throughout the whole book. It has great comedic timing and amazing conversations on communication and boundaries. I really love that the whole relationship is based on respect and that there is a thorough plot line of working through your own internalized homophobia and particularly biphobia, using things like alcohol as a crutch, realizing that maybe you want to try polyamory as a way to bring more love into your life, all within this world of the Salacious Players Club and everybody that is involved in that, particularly how business and pleasure coincides. Incredible sexy times. But I do find it very funny of the idea of going not it when talking about not wanting to demonstrate sex activities. Not it. If I had a nickel for every book that I read this month that had a surprise rope kink, I'd have 2 nickels. I'm gonna have a whole pocket of spare change by the end of this video, damn. Okay, now we're gonna go something very serious, very opposite of any of this stuff. It's not fantasy, it is not spicy. In fact, it has to do with body image and racism, so just get ready for the wild time we're about to have. I really do prefer to listen to my nonfiction books, and I've wanted to read Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings for a while now, so I finally used one of my Audible credits and listened to this over the weekend. I listened to a lot of social commentary podcasts and YouTube channels, and multiple people have recommended this book, so I was like, all right, I gotta get on this. I gotta figure out what's going on. It's white men. Literally, that's always what's going on. Sabrina Strings writes a historical narrative on the intersection of fat phobia and racism, ranging from the Renaissance to current day, showing the reader how through art and then later the Enlightenment that fatness and larger bodies became associated with savagery and brutality, and how colonialism brought thinness into the ideals of white supremacy. Like in the 15th century, the beauty ideal was to be rounded and well proportioned, and even then, religious ideologies had the idea that God created beauty diversely. But then when the slave trade started, the ideas of race and class started getting mixed up with the beauty standard. Then when sugar started getting introduced to a European diet and people started gaining weight, then the idea of gaining weight started being equated with like sluggishness and slow wit. And then in the 17th century, a lot of medical doctors just straight up made shit up. A lot of medical professionals described Black people and their bodies and their cultures without ever actually meeting a Black person. And don't even get me started on the whole religious aspect. God, religion. During the Victorian era, when the temperance movement was high and women were in more traditional roles, it became the woman's moral duty to like keep herself healthy and her family healthy and slim. So that further separated body types and races and morality. Overall, I think this is a great narrative book. It's a great start if you want to start deconstructing fat phobia. I did find it a bit repetitive. The author tends to like cycle back to things a lot, but not in a way that's like a callback, more to be like, hey, did you remember that I said this thing? And I'm like, I do remember that you said that thing like a chapter ago. Yeah, I remember that. I was there. And this is also specific to the audiobook, but the narrator for this book almost sounded AI, like to the point where a couple chapters in, I went and double checked that it was a real person reading this. So maybe I would suggest reading this as a physical copy or an ebook and not listening to it. Okay. Oh my god. Oh god, all the grounds were at the very bottom. I'm gonna put that down. Okay, so I really don't have a good segue for this, so let's talk about a book that I was peer pressured into reading this month for a book club, and I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that that finally gave me the excuse to read this. I've seen my mutual Jess on TikTok, aka Read More with Jess, talk nonstop about this book, and oh damn, she was right. Jade City by Fonda Lee was an incredible 5-star fantasy novel. It's a Japanese-inspired mid-century fantasy with jade bone warriors that can use magic from Jade to enhance their own abilities and become almost superhuman. Succession battles and political machinations between multiple high-ranking gang families in a city struggling in the aftermath of a war, while also on the edge of a new one. We mostly follow Lan, Hilo, Shay, and Andon, all high-ranking members of the No Peak clan, and the complicated tangle of their lives as the internal structures of the Green Bones collapse. I will say, you have to go in this expecting for your brain to hurt a little, because like she throws a lot at you. The first 10 chapters especially, very complicated. Lots of names and places and relationships and like hierarchical like name suffixes, and it got to a point where I felt like the guy with the string just like trying to make sense of it all. I loved how intricate this book was. Like we're doing this little dance of social hierarchy, also like what it takes to protect and appease the Lantern Man and who's behind you, how many steps ahead of everyone else you have to be and able to run your clan properly. Like, oh my god, it's fascinating. But she also really explores crisis and how crisis can make people show their true colors, but also what it means to be not only in power, but in power as a figurehead, and how being a figurehead in a time of peace is very different than being that figurehead in a time of war. And I love all of these messy, complicated characters, like Shay having to step up into a role she never wanted, and Hilo struggling with all of this new power, and then Andon realizing what power will do to somebody. Just delicious. Thank you to my internet friends for recommending this to me, and thank you to my girlfriend for introducing me to the book club that made me read this. And as we get to the end, I want to just take a moment and brag a little bit, because I did something that I haven't done in a very long time, and I did a one-shot book. I started this when I went to bed, expecting just to read a couple chapters, just have like a little fun time getting ready for bed, and then it was 1 a.m. and I was done the book. And I'm so happy that it was this book that I ended up doing it with, because it was Skater Boy by Anthony Nareda. I met Anthony like way back when, so he's part of the writing community of Vancouver that I'm also a part of. And to celebrate, Anthony asked me if I would be in conversation with him for his launch. So if you want to come on down to Indigo Langley on February 6th, we're gonna be there to talk about this queer pop punk coming of age story. So just, you know, it'll be like really fun or whatever. As the classic song goes, he was a punk, he did ballet. We follow main character Wes, who has major anger issues and this kind of bad boy persona that's causing him to fail senior year. But on one fateful day, when his mother drags him to see a local ballet production of The Nutcracker, he sees and instantly falls in love with Tristan, who is the principal male ballet dancer. Through a series of unfortunate events and miscommunications, eventually Wes and Tristan start spending more time together, and as they do so, Wes realizes that he wants more for himself and is determined to become more than what the adults in his life expect him to be. Anthony perfectly captured that over-exaggerated emotion of being a teenager and like not knowing what you're doing and feeling really unmoored and emotional, particularly with the emotions of teenage boys, and how society really only pushes anger as the acceptable emotion to show, and like Wes is trying to communicate, but he hasn't been given the skills to. Like, this is gay panic and gayer chaos. It really encapsulates that nervous energy of like being okay with who you are, but also being afraid of how people will treat you if you're outed, especially with Wes being more closeted and Tristan being more out and proud, and how those two things conflict when wanting to be in a relationship. But even though they have some ups and downs, like the two of them together are so incredibly sweet. And I especially loved the male friendship dynamic that came in a lot at the end, and how, again, like people tend to underestimate teenage boys. Reading this, I was just fully swept back to a time where I was rolling around on theater stages and wanting cute boys to follow me back on Instagram and scream singing Avril Lavigne at the top of my lungs. So if you love Becky Albertalli or Adib Karam or Adam Silvera, like I would highly, highly, highly recommend this. Give my friend a follow, give his book a read, and if you can, come visit us for the launch. And lastly, is a book that I'm so glad that I was wrong about. All right, so I'm gonna tell you a little secret. Come here. Okay, so I'm an English major. I studied the classics for 9 years, and I've only read Pride and Prejudice once. I am so freaking sick of all these Pride and Prejudice retellings because they never make sense. Not actually ever Pride and Prejudice retellings. You just have a guy that's like a little rude, and then a girl who's like, oh my god, I have sisters, or something like that. And then people just know that if you put Pride and Prejudice in the SEO settings and the tags, people will buy it because they're like, oh my god, Pride and Prejudice, the hand flex. Like, God, I'm sweating. That being said, the final book that I read in January 2024 is the Pride and Prejudice retelling to end all Pride and Prejudice retellings. This is the best Jane Austen retelling I have ever read, and if you disagree with me, we can go and fight at the next Netherfield ball, but until then, I need you to read Most Ardently by Gabe Conevoix. This is a historical YA coming of age that is part of the Remixed Classics series, where Elizabeth is in fact a trans boy named Oliver who is slowly falling in love with new boy in town Darcy, who is struggling to connect with his true self as his society and his mother are getting him ready for marriage. Now I say this as somebody who is not trans, but I thought that this was such a real look into body dysmorphia and societal expectations of gender, especially at this time when gender roles were more specific and things like fashions and manners and duties that high-class women were expected to take on. And oh my god, please, round of applause for Gabe for giving us correct historical dress. There's not a corset in sight. Instead we have lightly corded stays and a busk, and then later we have like petticoats and buckles, and then on men's waistcoats we have like depictions of like the different types of button layers, and then the high collars, and just oh my goodness, a man after my own historical dress-loving heart. And I love that even though we incorporated the classic plot beats that everybody loves, we still got to look at the queer history of London and incorporate that more into the story. Like, for example, the Molly clubs. I did think the ending was a little fast. Like, I feel like we should have gotten a little bit more resolution to everything. I felt like we wrapped it up a little too quickly. But overall, what an incredibly sweet book that hits all the plot beats that you want it to, while also going into like fighting for yourself and your identity and also queer joy. Oh, no, we're not gonna do that. And that is that on that. Thank you all for joining this evening. Oh my god, I'm done and I can go to bed. Truly, I am very happy with the range and amount that I ended up reading this month. I feel like it was a good jump start into the new year. I got some things to expand my bookshelves with. I found a couple of new favorites, and I've officially joined the cult of people who like Pride and Prejudice retellings. Oddly enough, a lot of retellings in this month's video. Not on purpose. Just like how I now have a pocket full of nickels for some reason. What can I say? The things I like to read are both specific and consistent. Please leave down below what you ended up reading this January, if you read some of these things, if you want to chat about them. Oh my god, I ran out of words like half an hour ago, and I need to go to sleep. You know where to click to like the video. You know where to click to subscribe. Please ignore the sound that my wrist just made there. Oh my god. I hope you guys are having a nice day or night wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!